Shalom. This is Nizama Shalhamada Bar Yasharal. On my channel again, Nizama, the Hebrew Mystic Healer. I'd like to give, as always, a shout out to my 3D kin, the 12 tribes of Israel, scattered to the four corners of the earth. Shalom and much love to you all. I'd also love to give a shout out to my cosmic kin, scattered to the 12 dimensions of this universal egg. And as always, give a little love to my viewers, especially those subscribed. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please do so now and make sure to hit the notification bell so that you do not miss out on any new cool material. So now that I've got that out of the way, I wanted to go ahead and touch on a topic that I feel is basically based on a misnomer, or basically a poor amalgamation or explanation of the texts and a lot of the mythologies that are in our collective consciousness, so to speak. And that is this idea that the Annunaki or the Nibiru are the Archons. So they're not. I just want to kind of put that out there. And that can be made clear even when you look into the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. I believe off the top of my head it's in the 9th chapter, but I could be mistaken. But I think it's in the 9th chapter when Thoth starts talking about how the Archons were given access to this particular universe through dark sorcery that was done during the time of Atlantis, that opened portals. So that right there already distinguishes Thoth, who was an Annunaki, was actually part of the Council of Nine, from the Archons, or what the Gnostics and many in the New Age community would call the Archons, and also in the alien conspiracy theory type communities as well. So I just kind of wanted to make that clear. So the Archons and the Annunaki are not the same beings. There's a distinction drawn by Thoth himself. Also, the way they're described, the reason why they tend to be lumped in is because some of the Archons, like, they're described two different ways, actually three different ways if you want to get technical. But one of the reasons they're usually confused with the Annunaki is that many believe that the Annunaki are the Draconians, or that they're a reptilian race. So that's another thing where everything gets lumped in. Now, I'm not to say that, first of all, the Annunaki did start out as a dragon, as primordial dragons out of the void that had feathered wings. They're basically feathered serpents, or, you know, what you would like basically they looked a lot like Quetzalcoatl in the Aztec culture, basically. And, you know, they didn't all look identical, but in the basic sense, they were draconic primordial beings, so that much is true. Also, when they came down, they also did mix with the indigenous Dracos, the indigenous Orions, indigenous Syrians, and some of the indigenous Lyrans as well. So there are some Annunaki that look reptilian, but not all of them look reptilian, and they can shapeshift. So they can, you know, and that's even actually talked about in a lot of mythologies that's surrounding the Annunaki, that usually they go from being bearded men, when they're talking about the men specifically, to taking on some kind of a quote-unquote inhuman form. So where the confusion comes is that a lot of the Archons are described as serpent-headed. So that's one type of Archon. Another type of Archon is described kind of as an amoeba. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but basically, or amoeba, basically like a type of parasitic entity that's energetic, that just kind of looks like one big cellular structure with like a mouth in the middle, basically. And those are also depicted a lot as types of energy body UFOs in the alien conspiracy community as well. So that's another type. They were actually described as looking almost like human embryos, but that was their actual form. The third type is the type that the Gnostics identify, or one of the types of Gnostics identify as the lion-headed worm, or in some renditions, the lion-headed serpent. So when we start looking at lion-headed serpent beings, they start almost resembling the Chinese Ling dragon. Now, I know a lot of people have different ideas of this. There's a lot of channelers and a lot of people in the Starseed community, New Age community, that believe that the Chinese Ling dragons are in fact the Archons. I don't share that view. I I really don't, and I'm going to explain why. The Chinese Ling dragons were elemental dragons that existed before the Archons even came here, even started interacting. Now, the Archons themselves are very old, very, very, very old, but they are not from this particular universe. They are actually from a lower abyss dimension. So when you think of the abyss, the dark abyss, and I'm not talking about the void. There's a difference between the abyss and the void. So the abyss is basically it's not really a hellish dimension, but it's a completely dark, lower vibration dimension. So the beings that reside there, their spark has become so diminished that they cannot sustain themselves. So the reason why that a lot of the Atlanteans started to do dark sorcery in the first place was these beings influencing them from another dimension to do dark sorcery, promising them empowerment. The Archons would also be considered in a lot of traditions to be demons. Now, not necessarily in the Hebrew Israelite tradition, because a lot of the Hebrew Israelites believe that the actual, that the Watchers, and I mean that the children of the Watchers, the spirits of the children of Watchers after they died are actually demons. I don't share that belief system at all. You guys know where I stand on that. I look at them as Annunaki and Annunaki inheritance. But in a lot of belief systems, the quote-unquote demons would actually be the same as the Archons. So I just want to make that clear. So the Archons themselves are from this abyss dimension. Now, in fact, a good example of the Archons would be, I don't know if any of you guys have seen the movie Event Horizon. It would be a perfect example of the Archons. So basically, they feed off of the energy of others. They need, especially lower dimensional energies, but they need lower dimensional energies and energy in general to sustain themselves. So they'll feed off of that. So when dark sorcery started being practiced during the time of Atlantis, they started requiring more and were empowering these beings, and they started to really possess these beings. So they started possessing, even some of the Annunaki were becoming possessed. And a lot of the people, the other beings on Earth at the time, some of the root races were participating in this. A lot of the root races actually were participating in this type of dark sorcery, and it created a schism. Now, I'm not going to go into the history of Atlantis and Lemuria and sorcery. I'm just going to kind of briefly mention this to make a point that the Archons are not the Annunaki, which is my whole point in all of this. So, because the Annunaki themselves were being manipulated and started getting into a lot of this stuff. So, the concept of animal sacrifices, and this is even talked about in the Emerald Tablets as well by Thoth, the concept of animal sacrifices and human sacrifices of shedding the blood of any being in order to get power or to appease a power, came from the Archons. And in fact, in order to they actually needed the blood of beings, of sacrifices, in order for them to access this dimension. This is what opened up portals and allowed them to access and control eventually over this dimension. This happened during the time of Atlantis. From that point on, the Archons started to control a lot of aspects of the way this universe operates. Now, they couldn't change the universal laws, but what they start to do was to actually try to entrap people here, to force them to reincarnate using kind of a trickery or using the universal laws themselves in order to convince people that they had to keep reincarnating, that they weren't quite done, they still had things to work on, so they could keep them from ascending, so they could feed off of their energy, specifically in the third and fourth dimension, even up to the fifth. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there. Now, I believe that a lot of what people would call the quote-unquote false light religions and some of the people, I believe, even in the Star communities and New Age communities, are actually channeling Archons mistakenly, because these beings have a lot of influence over this universe at this time because of what was done during Atlantis. So they can masquerade as quote-unquote angels of light or as light beings. They can do that. They can also play off of the dark side as well. So they play off of both of those sides. Now, they themselves come from a dark place. They come from the abyss. Again, not the same as the void. Now, this is where a lot of this confusion happens. Because the Nibiru, aka Annunaki, came out of the void, there's this association. Because the Nibiru Annunaki, many of them looked reptilian and actually started out draconic, there is this association. However, they are not the same thing. So I just kind of wanted to make that clear. And because if they were the same thing, then Thoth, as an Atlantean Annunaki himself, would not be drawing distinctions and saying, hey, look, these beings showed up on the scene. The Annunaki were here long before the Archons even started to show up. So I just wanted to make that clear. So I'm going to get up, guys, because this noise with the door is driving me nuts. Okay. So anyway, I just wanted to go ahead and explain that difference and let you guys know that the Annunaki and the Archons are not the same beings. They are very different. Now, what are the Archons doing today? What is their game plan? Well, as I already mentioned before, they are using the laws of this universe to their advantage in order to hold beings here. Another great example of the Archons and how they operate, it'd be found in the Matrix. The Matrix is a perfect example of that. In fact, the machines themselves look very amoeba-like. They look like that, you know, that kind of like cellular, like some of them have little, you know, some of them have tentacles, and again, they are using the humans in that movie as batteries, keeping them asleep. Now, this is a metaphor, but it's also literal in a lot of ways. I mean, these beings are artificial to this universe. So when we look at it from that standpoint, that's accurate. And these beings do have an investment in keeping us asleep and keeping us in this universe, because as long as we stay here and we keep fighting the good fight, and this whole concept of getting caught in dualism and playing out these dramas, they want that. They don't even care what quote unquote side you choose, as long as you stay polarized and as long as you stay focused on the lower dimensions and not ascending and not going back to source. And as long as you keep thinking like, you know, I have to do this, I have to do that. I have this particular job to do and this mission to do. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have certain aspects within soul growth that we are trying to focus on during our incarnations. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is there is a manipulation or a hijacking of the reincarnation system. It's supposed to be a free will thing. It's also, yes, we are subject to the laws of this universe, but these laws are actually being used to manipulate to keep us lower. That was not part of the original plan. In fact, this 3D density was not part of the original universe. This happened in succession as we started falling in density within the universe itself in our ignorance and who we were, and us, you know, starting to lose our memory. Now, this all happened during the time of Atlantis, because during the time of early Mu, early Lemuria, and even to a degree mid Lemuria, there was no third density like there is now. We were actually embodying a higher vibration. We were actually embodying several dimensions at once. That's why we had access and could communicate with a lot of these elemental beings and a lot of these higher vibrational beings. We dropped in density. This version of the Earth plane, this 3D version, is not the version that we were in. This is the Earth in a lower density. This density did not even come about until during the time of Atlantis. So I just want to make that clear. We as creators do have the capability of creating densities, whether they're lower or higher, based on our collective vibration. And this is actually why the elite, who are ruled and serve the Archons, work so hard to try to keep our vibration low. Not only do these elite want to rule over us, and they feed off our energy to a large degree too, but they use us for their own personal sacrifices, blood sacrifices, energy sacrifices, all these types of rituals to the archonic beings. So I just want to make that clear. Now, are there regressive Annunaki races that look reptilian? Absolutely. Are there regressive reptilian races that are not Annunaki? Absolutely. Are they Archons as described in the Emerald Tablets and in the Nag Hammadi scriptures? No, I do not believe so. I know for sure at least they're not Annunaki, because Thoth, aka Tehuti himself, is an Annunaki, and he talks about these Archons showing up on the scene way after they were on Earth, way after the Anunnaki were in the universe, and that the Anunnaki themselves were actually having a hard time with these beings. So I just kind of wanted to point out that distinction. So I feel like I covered everything. I'm sorry for the interruption earlier, but I think I covered everything. I may do a follow-up video on this, but more than likely not. I still have part 2 of the history of the universe from the Council of Nine's perspective coming. I still have part 3 of the Kabbalah coming. So go ahead and stay tuned, guys, for more videos. Thank you for your time. Take care. Much love. Shalom.